Waiter humiliates black boy, not knowing he's the son of Big Shaq. The restaurant was buzzing with energy. Plates clinked, conversations overlapped, and the air was thick with the scent of sizzling food. Jordan, a young waiter with an attitude, moved swiftly between tables, trying to manage the night shift. His uniform was wrinkled, his hair slightly messy from the fast pace of his work. He could feel the pressure of the busy night pushing him to his limits, but it wasn't just the orders that frustrated him. It was the customers. One table caught his eye in the far corner. A young black boy, about 16, sat alone. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the chaos around him. He had placed his order and was sitting patiently, waiting for his father. To Jordan, the boy looked like any other customer, nothing special. The boy wasn't even dressed in anything that stood out. Just a simple hoodie, some jeans. Jordan couldn't help but feel a little judgmental, his tired mind already jumping to conclusions. The boy was young, quiet, and didn't seem like someone who could afford a place like this. Jordan moved on quickly, deciding that it wasn't worth his attention. He was too busy to care. What Jordan didn't know was that the boy's father, Big Shaq, had stepped into the washroom as soon as they arrived. As Jordan returned to the table with the food, his patience had worn thin. He was mentally exhausted, but still, he had to keep up the facade of professionalism. He dropped the plates down a little harder than necessary, causing a slight clatter that made the boy flinch just a little. "Hope you can pay for all this. Not everyone can afford it, you know," Jordan muttered, not bothering to meet the boy's eyes. His tiredness had pushed him over the edge, and his words came out in a harsh whisper. The boy looked up at him, calm as ever. His eyes locked onto Jordan's, but he said nothing. The silence made Jordan feel uncomfortable, but it wasn't enough to stop him. He had already made up his mind. "People like you don't usually come here," Jordan continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "You really think you belong here? Shouldn't you be somewhere else? Maybe fast food would be more your style." The boy didn't flinch. He didn't say a word, just stared at the plate in front of him. His silence only fueled Jordan's anger and arrogance. He expected a reaction, any kind of protest, but nothing came. It irked him, and in that irritation, he said something even worse. "People like you're just taking up space here," he muttered under his breath as he turned to walk away. Jordan, now feeling a surge of satisfaction, started walking away, convinced that the boy wasn't going to do anything. He was used to people like him. He had dealt with customers who couldn't afford what they ordered, people who didn't quite belong, and he had learned to talk down to them. But the boy's silence wasn't just passive, it was unsettling. Jordan turned back toward the table, a little bolder now, thinking he had the upper hand. He leaned in a little closer to the boy. "You really think you fit in here? You look out of place," Jordan taunted, his words growing sharper. "You should be at a fast food joint. This place isn't for you." The boy's face didn't show the rage Jordan expected. Instead, his jaw tightened slightly. His posture was still calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a quiet strength. "I'm here to eat," the boy said softly but firmly, his voice unwavering. Jordan's ego was bruised. He wasn't getting the reaction he wanted, so he pushed further. "You're nothing special, just like everyone else. People like you don't belong in places like this." He spoke under his breath as he walked away, feeling a strange satisfaction in tearing the boy down, even though he knew deep down it wasn't right. The boy said nothing, but the air around him seemed to shift. There was a quiet tension now. Jordan didn't know it, but that tension wasn't just coming from the boy. It was coming from the very air that surrounded them, from someone who had been watching closely. Big Shaq had been in the washroom when the insults began. He'd heard the clatter of the plates and the quiet murmur of his son's calm voice. But what he didn't expect was the bitterness of Jordan's words, the venom he had thrown at his son. He walked out of the washroom, his tall, imposing figure casting a shadow as he moved across the room. Heads turned, but Jordan, still oblivious, was busy behind the counter. As Big Shaq walked past their table, he noticed the boy, his son, sitting with a quiet strength, but something was off. His posture had stiffened. His eyes were still calm, but there was a quiet fire burning underneath the surface. Big Shaq paused, sensing that something wasn't right. He didn't immediately reveal himself. Instead, he stood at the door, watching. He didn't make a move yet. He wasn't just the father of this boy. He was a man who had seen the world's unfairness up close, who had fought to rise above judgment and hate. He wasn't going to jump into action without understanding the situation first. Jordan was still busy, not realizing that the person he had so casually insulted was standing just a few feet away. Big Shaq had heard every word. His heart sank with the realization of how his son had been treated. But he wasn't angry. Not yet. Instead, he stepped forward, his calm presence commanding attention. He walked straight toward Jordan, blocking his path as the waiter tried to go about his duties. The air seemed to thicken as Big Shaq stood in front of him, his towering figure casting a long shadow. Jordan froze, immediately sensing the change in the atmosphere. "What did you say?" Big Shaq's voice was deep, calm, but it carried the weight of authority. Jordan looked up, his eyes widening in shock. He hadn't realized who the boy's father was. His nervousness set in as he stammered, I didn't... You're the one who insulted my son, right?" Big Shaq's tone didn't rise, but there was power in it, something Jordan hadn't expected. Jordan's heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't just insulted a random customer. He had disrespected the son of someone who wouldn't stand for it. Big Shaq's presence was overwhelming, but his voice remained composed. "What did you say to my son?" he repeated, his eyes never leaving Jordan's. Jordan opened his mouth to apologize, but the words didn't come out. He could feel the weight of Big Shaq's gaze bearing down on him, and his heart pounded in his chest. "You think because of how he looks, you can treat him differently?" Big Shaq's voice was steady, almost like a calm storm. "You think respect is earned by appearances, by assumptions, by judgment?" Jordan swallowed hard. He had assumed so much based on the boy's outward appearance, his age, his race, his calm demeanor. But now he realized how wrong he was. Big Shaq's presence alone made Jordan feel like a child being scolded by his father, and he couldn't hide from it. Big Shaq took a step closer, his words ringing with truth. "Respect is earned through how you treat others, not by what you think of them." Jordan's face burned with shame. He tried to apologize, but it was too late. The damage was done. Big Shaq turned to his son, giving him a quiet nod. Without a word, they both stood up and walked toward the door. As they left the restaurant, Big Shaq's calm voice echoed through the air. "Think about what you've learned." Jordan stood there, frozen in place, the weight of the lesson sinking in. The sting of humiliation, the realization of his own ignorance, was something he would never forget. The restaurant was the same, but Jordan wasn't. He had learned that true strength wasn't in tearing others down. It was in raising them up, in giving them the respect they deserved. Respect isn't about appearances or assumptions, it's about how we treat others. True strength lies in understanding that every person deserves dignity, no matter their background. Like this video if you believe in treating everyone with respect. Subscribe for more powerful stories and hit the bell icon so you never miss a lesson.